The courtroom was colder than I remembered. Light spilled from high windows, harsh and sterile, reflecting off the polished oak tables until everything looked sharp enough to cut. My daughter sat across from me, her shoulders straight, her hand locked around the woman beside her. When she called that woman Mom, the word hit harder than any verdict could. My body stayed still, but something inside me cracked open and bled quietly. I had promised myself I would not cry in this room. I watched her profile as the lawyer began to speak, his voice steady and sure, describing me as if I were a stranger. Unfit. Bitter. Temporary. Each word rolled across the courtroom like a judgment written in stone. My heart pounded, but my face stayed calm. 16 years of night shifts had taught me endurance. 16 years of measuring my life by time cards and pay stubs, earning $58,000 a year, and still finding a way to give her everything. The sound of his words faded, and memory filled the silence instead. I saw braces that cost $400, and the way she smiled after the pain. I saw birthday cakes I baked at midnight after double shifts. I remembered the times I pawned jewelry, skipped vacations, and ate instant noodles so she could go on school trips. Every sacrifice fit neatly into numbers that no one in this room cared to see. Across the aisle, her stepmother looked flawless in beige silk, every strand of hair perfectly in place, even her sadness was rehearsed. The judge adjusted his glasses, and the air hummed with tension. My daughter never looked my way. That was fine. I folded my hands, steady and silent. They thought I was a placeholder, but placeholders don't build futures worth $2 million. For 16 years, my life revolved around one goal, giving my daughter a future better than my own. I started as a pharmaceutical technician, earning barely enough to cover the rent and daycare. When promotions came slowly, I took every extra shift offered, nights, weekends, holidays. My paycheck grew from $48,000 to $58,000 a year, but the exhaustion never left. I kept a ledger on my kitchen counter where most people would keep flowers. Every cost was written down in careful lines, every number a memory of what love really looked like. $400 for braces that made her cry for a week. $850 for a laptop she needed for school. $1,200 for the hospital visit when asthma scared us both in the middle of the night. Groceries, clothes, bus tickets, tutoring sessions. It all added up to $230,000 by the time she turned 16. I knew the figure because I tracked every penny. Love was something I could measure in numbers when words failed me. When she was sleeping, I would sit at the kitchen table, bills spread out like chapters of our story, proof that I was trying. There were nights I came home past midnight, shoes sticky from the factory floor, uniform smelling of chemicals. I sold my old car when the repairs cost more than it was worth. I turned down beach trips with friends because vacation time meant lost income. Birthdays were celebrated with store-bought cakes eaten between shifts. I smiled through it all because I believed one day she would understand. I believed the years would make sense when she saw what sacrifice looked like in real life. But time has a way of testing even the strongest hearts. When her father remarried, everything changed quietly at first. The new wife was polished and articulate, the kind of woman who knew how to turn a compliment into influence. She showed up at school events with perfect posture and warm eyes. My daughter came home talking about her new mother's calm voice, her tidy house, her effortless charm. I tried not to compete. I told myself love was not a performance. Still, I felt the distance forming like fog. Calls came less often, weekends grew shorter. My daughter started calling me Elena instead of Mom, just once, as if testing how it sounded. I learned to stay composed, to let the silence pass. People said the stepmother had a softer touch, that she was understanding, elegant, patient. Maybe she was, but softness is easy when you never had to build anything from nothing. It takes no strength to be kind in comfort. I knew what endurance cost. I had the records to prove it. I had bank statements filled with sacrifices she would never see. When I looked at them, I didn't feel pride. I felt a quiet ache, like proof that love had receipts. The world rewards appearances, but endurance leaves evidence. The courtroom felt colder that morning, as if the air itself was holding its breath. The fluorescent lights hummed softly, casting pale reflections across the oak tables and glass water pitchers. Every sound echoed, the shuffle of papers, the creak of a chair, the distant tap of a gavel. Across the aisle, the opposing lawyer rose, his tone smooth and rehearsed. He spoke of emotional neglect, claiming that I had provided money but never warmth. Behind him, the stepmother dabbed her eyes with a tissue, a picture of fragile virtue. The gallery murmured, hungry for a spectacle. I sat still, hands folded, spine straight, eyes fixed on the empty space between us. He described me as distant, controlling, a woman who used money as a leash. He said my daughter had grown up starved of affection, desperate for understanding, which she found in her stepmother's arms. Each word landed carefully, designed to bruise. I let him finish. When the silence returned, I opened my briefcase and placed 3 folders on the table. Their tabs were marked A, B, and C, written in steady black ink. I slid folder A forward first. Inside were 16 years of IRS tax filings, neatly arranged, totaling $940,000 in earnings. Every line showed withheld pay over time and deductions that told a story no one cared to read. Folder B followed. Inside were hospital receipts, school attendance records, and letters from teachers who thanked me for showing up alone. At the bottom sat a small USB drive. The judge watched as the courtroom screen flickered to life, playing a clip from my daughter's graduation. She hugged me that day, tears in her eyes, whispering that she couldn't have done it without me. The sound filled the silence, soft and undeniable. Finally, folder C, the 529 College Fund Statement. $2,040,000 accumulated over 16 years, growing quietly while I worked the night shifts she once despised. The opposing lawyer looked down, the stepmother's tears stopped, and my daughter stared at the table. I felt no triumph, only clarity. Proof sat before them, paper and ink heavier than any accusation. I counted every dollar of my presence. The judge's fingers paused at the final page of folder C. His eyes scanned the lines once, then again, slower this time. The room grew still. He cleared his throat and read aloud the clause at the bottom of the document. Adoption by another party nullifies access to the fund. The words cut through the silence like a verdict already written. Gasps rippled through the gallery. The stepmother stiffened, color draining from her face. My daughter's lawyer began to stammer something about manipulation, but the judge lifted a hand to stop him. The only sound left was the faint hum of the ceiling lights and the sharp rhythm of my own heartbeat. My daughter turned to me, confusion clouding her eyes. She whispered something I couldn't hear, her lips trembling as she looked from the judge to the papers that now defined her future. The stepmother leaned close, her voice sharp but low, trying to hold control. It slipped through her tone like water through shaking hands. The judge leaned back in his chair, studying both of them before speaking again. This court cannot approve an adoption that erases both identity and financial future. His words landed with the finality of truth. A murmur spread through the crowd, disbelief and realization twisting together. The stepmother's poise shattered as she stood, voice cracking, insisting that love mattered more than money. The judge turned his gaze toward her, steady and unimpressed. 16 years of records, sacrifice, and care are not erased by sentiment. He closed the folder with deliberate care, the sound echoing in the quiet room. My daughter looked small now, lost between 2 worlds she no longer understood. I did not move. I did not smile. I only gathered my papers, stacked them neatly, and waited. The gavel struck once, sharp and final. The case was dismissed. I breathed out slowly, feeling the weight of years settle into stillness. Justice isn't loud. It's written in ink, sealed in law, and carried by patience. The hallway outside the courtroom was narrow and echoing, filled with the smell of coffee and old wood polish. The stepmother's voice broke the silence first, sharp and furious. hissing words that carried down the corridor. She accused my daughter of betrayal, of embarrassment, of ruining everything they had planned. My daughter stood frozen at first, eyes wide, then something shifted in her. She pulled her hand free and said quietly that she was tired of lies. The stepmother's face twisted, her control slipping away for the first time. I stood at the far end, watching, not moving, the ache in my chest deeper than any victory could bring. Their argument drew stares from people leaving the courtroom. The stepmother's voice grew louder, cracking under pressure. My daughter's voice, once small, grew steady. She asked why she had been told I had nothing left, why she had been pushed to erase her own blood. The stepmother had no answer, only anger. My lawyer touched my arm, whispering that I could leave, but I stayed. It felt important to witness truth break free on its own. Days later, truth found another way to surface. The financial investigation that followed revealed $78,000 missing from an account in my daughter's name. Transfers linked back to the stepmother's personal credit lines. Screenshots and text messages began circulating, evidence of her manipulation and the pressure she placed on a teenage girl. The internet did what courts could not. Her name spread across local news and parent groups, not with sympathy, but with outrage. That week, I received an email from my daughter. The subject line was one word: sorry. The message was longer than I expected, full of guilt and confusion. She wrote that she finally saw how easily kindness could disguise control. I read it twice before replying. Forgiveness isn't a transaction, it's understanding. I hit send and sat still for a long time, feeling both heavy and light. When the scandal reached its peak, the stepmother's carefully built image collapsed. Friends unfollowed her, neighbors turned away, and employers distanced themselves. I did not celebrate. I simply watched as silence did its work. Some truths don't need to be shouted, they only need to be seen. Truth has its own form of justice. 2 months later, the house felt smaller but warmer. The walls still carried old memories, but the silence inside was gentle now, not heavy. Evening light spilled across the kitchen table where I set 2 plates of pasta, steam rising in quiet swirls. My daughter sat across from me, her hair pulled back the way she used to wear it in middle school. We ate slowly. The kind of meal that doesn't need words. Outside, the sun dropped low enough to paint everything gold. She pushed her fork aside and looked up. Her voice was soft when she asked why I never used the $2 million for myself. I smiled, not because I was proud, but because the answer was simple. I told her that money was never meant to make me comfortable. It was meant to protect her from the world's cruelty. It was my way of building something that would outlast both of us. Conscience, honor, and truth don't sit in bank accounts, but they hold their value longer than anything you can buy. She sat quietly after that, eyes lowered, thinking. I could see the understanding forming, slow but steady, like dawn after a long storm. She reached for my hand, hesitant at first, and I felt her fingers tremble. I didn't speak. I let the moment fill the space between us, soft and complete. The air smelled of garlic and the faint sweetness of summer. Somewhere outside, a neighbor's dog barked once and went quiet again. That night, when I turned off the lights and looked at her sitting by the window, I felt a calm I hadn't known in years. For 16 years, I had carried her future. Now she carried the lesson. Justice had done its work. What remained was peace. In a world that measures worth by money and applause, truth often feels invisible, yet it is the one currency that never loses value. Wealth fades, recognition shifts, but integrity outlasts both. The hardest battles are not fought in courtrooms or boardrooms, but in the quiet moments when no one is watching, and you choose what kind of person you will be. Real success is not comfort, it is conscience. It is knowing you stood for something right, even when it cost you affection. Ask yourself this: would you still fight for justice even if love walked away?